I want to take my business from 20 million to 50 million. If you have not done that, don't apply.
People don't break, systems do.
You can't sell a $500,000 solution to solve a $200,000 problem. We laid off, fired tens of thousands of salespeople.
What do you love to do? You're instinctively volunteering for it. When you're doing it, you're in flow.
So you need to do the things that make you more money. And that starts with the human to human part of this process. You won't fix it with technology. You'll make it worse.
Hello and welcome to Making Revenue Tick. This masterclass is very special because I'm joined with someone who I met because I absolutely loved the energy that you were putting out on LinkedIn. So, hello, Mike. How are you?
I'm great, Richard. How are you today?
I'm really good, thank you. I'm really good. I'm giving you like a high bar to fall from there. But I have no doubt from the conversations that we've had that you'll surpass the expectations that I've just set. But I remember you're writing some things on LinkedIn. I was like, this is exactly the kind of energy that I want to see on this platform. Everyone's talking about here is everything that's terrible, but there wasn't any kind of like expertise behind it. It was just to try and get likes. There wasn't speaking from a place of like genuinely caring about the topic, which you really do. And when we started speaking together, there were so many different things that we could have talked about, but you said something to me and I was like, oh my goodness gracious me, the penny has dropped. Because everyone talks about how hard the market is, and it is hard. And everyone talks about the macroeconomic factors, and they're there. And it's tough, and I get it. And a lot of people are in a not ideal situation. But you made a big sort of challenging the status quo statistic for me and a bit of data around pipeline. So for the listeners to join the conversation where we kind of left it off, Mike, you were talking to me about pipeline. Talk to me about that conversation that we had.
Sure. What we were, by the way, things have always been good or bad, right? I've been doing this for a very long time and I've sold through 5 recessions. So it's not like we haven't been here before.
Sure.
What we were talking about was this notion of you need 3x pipeline to make your quota, which, by the way, that was really a metric that was created about 25 years ago. And I was in the proverbial room when it happened. I was selling CRM for the number one vendor in the world, and it's not correct. And now we've made it worse because we've said, oh, no, you need 5x or 6x. So it's like we actually said, oh, we don't want you to get better. We just want you to have more stuff to work on.
Sure.
It's a complete reversal of what should be happening. And I've been in sales for a very long time, like longer than most people who are going to watch this have been on the planet. And just the whole idea behind this is wrong. There's no other way to put it. Because fundamentally, you have to fix the process. It doesn't matter how much you throw at it. And I think the other thing we were talking about, and I believe we're going to get into today, is if you think about a sales process as a manufacturing process, where the lead is the raw material and the closed won opportunity is your yield. And in a manufacturing process, you are always thinking about how do I optimize every step and stage along the way to maximize my yield and reduce my raw material. And what we've done is the exact reverse. So we're going to increase the raw material, but not only are we not going to increase the yield, we may actually reduce the yield. I'm wrong about a lot of things, but so far I haven't had a lot of people come to me and say, Mike, you're wrong.
Yeah.
So when you think about it that way, you start to say, all right, well, hold on, where's the process broken? And what you'll find is there are a lot of places where the process is broken. It starts really with qualification and discovery. And
sure.
I have long held the belief that deals are won or lost at qualification and discovery.
It makes sense because it is so true. I've grown up in an era, I'm a 41-year-old person who joined the tech industry in 2007. And I've just grown up with it. It's 3x pipeline that you need. And sales forecasts are all built on 3x pipeline. But also, I'm very aware of the amount of time that I and my teams have spent on working on, forecasting on, and not winning the wrong business or winning the wrong business, and then all of the problems that come from having terrible fit customers inside the business.
Right.
So this idea that you can win bad business, you can take a yield from bad material and call it a product, but you put that on the road in your car sort of manufacturing example, you're not going to have a very good reputation.
Right. And you've created another process that needs to be addressed that's broken.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was on LinkedIn this morning with a customer success manager who had posted about losing this customer that she had a great relationship with. And she didn't do anything wrong, by the way. I think she's brilliant. And what she posted was brilliant.
Sure.
Part of it is the process never had her or anybody else in her organization apparently forming relationships with senior executives. Which, by the way, is a sales issue. But also fundamentally making sure that we're delivering value at every step and stage, because that's why people buy from us. And when they don't get at least the value that they expected, if not more, then it doesn't matter if they're happy. It doesn't matter if they like you. When something that will deliver value comes along, they'll churn.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard thing also for customer success and CROs and chief customer officers to wrap their head around. It's like, oh, my NPS, my net promoter score says this.
Sure.
Right, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. You can be as happy as you want.
Yeah, sure. I love it. Cool. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this pipeline problem. We're going to really pull on this manufacturing analogy. We'll talk about what's broken. You made a big point when we were first speaking about how the problem is in discovery. And I'll be really honest, my sort of reaction to that was, I reckon I'm not doing discovery as well as I could be. And it's definitely a skill set that isn't focused on or taught as much as it should be. There's so many other things that we get focused on in terms of teaching salespeople and enabling salespeople and our one-to-ones and our reviews, and not really focused on let's really, really laser in on discovery. It's a lot about how do we negotiate? How do we accelerate pipeline? How do we improve forecasting?
Yeah,
exactly right. But it's exactly like you say. It's kind of like we're all just trying to go and make sure that we achieve this closed won percentage that we're trying to go and get from our opportunities. But assuming that we're putting good products into our machine. So I would love to understand the man behind all of this. Okay. So for anyone that hasn't had the opportunity to meet you before, give us an idea around who you are and the journey that you've been on to get to this point.
Sure. No, thank you. So I'm a Boston guy, Boston born and raised. And it's funny because people say, well, you don't have the accent. And then they spend a few minutes with me. It's like, oh yeah, you're from Boston. I might give you a hard time about your sports team, or maybe the language gets a little bit rough, but people will figure it out pretty quickly. I'm a B2B sales guy. I've been in B2B sales for 36 years, which is crazy when you think about that. So I predate the internet, cell phones. We didn't have any of it. We had manila folders and payphones. And guess what? We made our number, right? And we made our number. We didn't have 25% close rates. That'll get you fired. We didn't know or think about things like 3X and 4X pipeline. We were numbers driven, but it was a very different mentality. Mm. But so early days, I was selling payroll for a company called ADP. It was all territory based. I moved into tech in the mid 90s during the evolution of client server to mainframe. And then that led me into what was then called technology enabled selling, which became Salesforce automation, which became CRM. Did that for a whole bunch of years. Tremendous wave. Moved at the end of that from being an individual contributor. At that point, I'd been an IC for 15 years to sales leadership roles. And I've held a bunch of sales leadership roles at everything from pre-revenue companies to the global galactics like Oracle and IBM. I've held pretty much every leadership position from director to CRO. And all that means, by the way, is there's not much that happens that's new. There are a lot of repeating patterns. A year and a half ago, I launched a fractional CRO offering, a fractional head of sales offering, which I call Calm Ocean Sales, which, as you can tell by my surroundings, I live near the ocean. I'm an ocean guy. I love anything that puts me on, near, under, or the water is all good. And everybody wants to just be and sail in a calm ocean so that And it also harkens back to blue ocean strategy, if you're familiar with that. And I've had the opportunity to work with a number of clients, mostly SaaS companies. That's my preference, to either do performance coaching for their sales leaders, to go to market assessments with playbook strategies, to operating as the actual head of sales for 5 to 7 months for these companies, and doing everything that you would expect a CRO to do, from hiring and training and forecasting and being on sales calls and all that.
I love it. That's really interesting, because I think we can definitely talk about the fractional side here as part of this conversation. We can definitely also talk about these earlier stage companies who are either bootstrapping or they're getting investment, and what that looks like and how that affects things. Because, a huge amount of the challenge that comes from the expectations that are set are based on the money that goes into the business. But they're all built on these systems which assume some sort of waterfall, funnel from here's what we're going to go and give you and drive at the top, and then this is what we're going to produce. Or more likely, here's what we need to produce. Let's reverse engineer that and what we need at the top.
Yes. So this was the light bulb moment for me, by the way, which was, I think it was the third client that I had in the last year and a half where we had to rip the pipeline down to nothing and start over again.
Yeah, sure.
And by the way, I spent 5 years at an integration company, and we never had enough pipeline. We would go into the quarter at like 1.9x pipeline.
Yeah.
So 50% of the pipeline that we were supposed to have, yet we would deliver 75 to 95% of the number. And we figured out qualification and discovery there, but it wasn't until I was doing this other work across a range of customers that it finally, like, the light bulb went off. And it was, you can spend all the money you want on your tech stack. It doesn't matter if you haven't fixed the underlying process. And that's what we were seeing over and over and over again. As I would get into these agreements, into these arrangements, and start working through the pipeline, only to find out that the majority of the opportunities were not qualified. The reps were working on reps aren't doing anything wrong.
Sure.
And I wouldn't even say, sales ops to the sales leaders, nobody's doing anything wrong. It's a matter of we got off track. And it starts to show up with things like when you're looking at pipeline, if you apply aging to it, as you would, again, raw material and manufacturing. And you say, well, my average sales cycle is 73 days. And then you look at the pipeline and you start to see deals that are 100, 120, 300, 400 days old. It's like, hold on just a second. How can it either the attribution is wrong, or you're working on a non-qualified opportunity and you keep kicking it forward quarter over quarter, checking in, how about now? How about now? But when you go back to the very beginning of the process, it was never qualified to begin with.
Sure.
So you start taking all of those opportunities out of the pipeline and you're left with anywhere from 10 to 30%, which, by the way, is a very difficult conversation to have with CEO and CFO that you're doing that. But the result is there. Because first off, I can't, if I'm working, just to pick a number, 10 deals and 7 of them are not qualified, I risk the other 3 deals because I can't put the time and energy into it, and I make mistakes, or I give my competitor an opportunity to get involved or to build the relationships. So you have to have people working on winnable deals, period. And we saw results like we had one client where we took down about 90% of the pipeline. We rebuilt it in 6 weeks, by the way, between our sales folks and an outsourced BDR agency, and turned it around. Had another one where similar to, I think it was like 70% of the pipeline we took down. Their ARR was, I don't want to implicate anybody, it was sub $100,000 in May, and then almost $400,000 by July. And when you talk to the team, they were like, oh, this is a completely different experience now. So it's not just it wasn't a one-time thing where I saw this. It's repeating over and over and over again. And then on top of it, then I'll pause. In each of these cases, we instituted a different way of qualifying the opportunities.
Sure.
And not only did we institute it from a training standpoint, but we put it into the CRM system, which in all the cases was Salesforce, in written note, no drop down, so that everybody could understand what good looks like. And when we did forecast calls, we could dial in very, very quickly to, is this really a qualified opportunity? And that's where the 4Ws came from. And the 4Ws came along about 8 years ago. So I've now instituted it or implemented it in, I think, 5 or 6 companies. So I have a high degree of confidence that it works.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. Well, it's a nice place to ask you about that, because obviously we were exposing the problem and I was like, right, we definitely need to get better at discovery. But what is the solution? And everyone's got all these different methodologies and people are doing, their BANT qualification and their spiced qualification and their medic qualification. But you had a different framework and you weren't really sure of the name. By the way, I think I've got a name for you. Ask me at the end of the pod.
Yay, that's exciting, because I've not been able to do that.
It would be the cliffhanger, but I think I've got the name. It came to me on a dog walk the other day. So let's talk about the currently named 4Ws.
The current name is 4Ws, right?
Yeah, let's talk about it. So what does that look like? Proper discovery, 4Ws. Talk to me.
So let me give a bit of a backdrop. So we have been taught in sales for decades to sell to pain. But guess what? People don't buy because they're in pain. People don't change because they're in pain. I have an injury to my elbow. I've had it for a month. It's very painful. I have not been to a doctor. I have no intention of going to a doctor, because everything that I want to do in my life, I can still do. It's just that I have pain. Businesses are the same way. Businesses can operate in pain for many, many years, maybe forever, and not actually do anything about it. Change happens with a business or with a person when they get to a place that is untenable or becoming untenable. So rethinking qualification and discovery around that notion. By the way, this also came from my acupuncturist like 12 years ago. It wasn't even a bit like we all like look to the sales gurus for expertise. It was my acupuncturist who made a comment to me, and I was like, "Oh, that's brilliant." And his question was, "What can't you do? Because you're not here because you're in pain. You're here." He's like, and I answered him, and he said, "Well, yeah." It goes, "Yeah, people come to me generally because of weakness. There's something that they can't do, not because they're in pain." I was like, "Oh no, I got to rethink my whole life now." So the 4Ws are: what happened, why now, who owns the project, when do you need to be in production. Notice there's no budget question.
Sure.
We don't ask budget, because when I ask somebody budget, I'm asking them to lie to me. Because when you ask somebody budget, all the sales folks on this call know, one, they either say, "I'm not allowed to tell you that," or they give you a bogus number, because if they say, "Oh, I have $100,000," oh, well, Mike's going to give me a proposal for $100,000 or $99.99, right? So it's like, so let's not insult the buyer or put them into a deeper fear situation on the call. So let me give you a little bit more on this. So when we do a discovery or a qualification call, and by the way, I encourage, unless it's a transactional sale, that qualification is one call, 20 minutes. Discovery is a completely separate and distinct call. Demo follows discovery in a distinct call. I'll explain why. So in the first conversation with somebody, we do the setup. If you've been Sandler trained or, or AXNOT is another, but basically you get the fairness upfront contract that we're not going to waste each other's time. And then the first question is, "Hey, Richard, let me ask you a question. What happened that you reached out to ComMotion Sales?" That's on the inbound. If it's outbound, "Richard, I know you're super busy. Everybody is. What happened, or what was said to you that made you set aside time in your schedule for this conversation?" The "what happened" question, first off, it's a pattern interrupt. People don't expect that question, right? They come to a conversation with a salesperson, and they're like, "He's going to ask me budget. I know he's going to ask me when I'm buying." And then we don't ask the question, and they're like, temperature goes down.
Yeah.
So the what happened is the catalyst or the trigger. There, in a B2B sale, there is always a catalyst or a trigger in a qualified opportunity. And it's things like, we record the calls, we listen to these conversations, and it's things like, Richard came to Mike and said, "This forecasting process is completely broken. If you don't have this fixed within 45 days or within 1 quarter, I'm going to put somebody in the chair who can do it." So now Mike is in a situation like, "Mike, I got to find a solution to this problem."
Sure.
Or the drill press in the power in the plant keeps breaking. And every time it breaks, the line has to shut down for 4 hours. You need to find a drill press that's not going to break. Catalyst. So once we know what that is, we can begin to dial into whether there's really a problem here that has to be solved. That's separate from the why now. The why now is the business problem. Oh, your drill press keeps breaking down. How long has that been going on? You said the line has to shut down. What does that cost when the line shuts down? What do you do with the workers? So now I get into the real meat of it. Who owns the project? I'm looking for the senior executive, C-level officer, SVP, because especially in today's economy, right? So I will give the nod back to the economy. Nothing is purchased without a senior executive saying, yes, go buy it. So the catalyst and the senior executive are the two strongest indicators of qualification. And I'm not going to, if they say, oh, I can't tell you that's like, I'm not going to call the person. I just want to understand like how this is all coming together in your organization. And then the last question is, when do you need to be in production? Not when are you buying, when do you need to be in production? And it doesn't have to be an exact date. It can be an approximate date. But what I want to know is, my boss said, go look at new RFP technology for us to buy in 2026. That's not a qualified opportunity. It's not. That we see reps working on this stuff, but that's not a qualified opportunity at all. That's a prospect. So we don't ask budget. We don't ask necessarily need. Timing is, like for me, it's the timing has to be current quarter +2 for most B2B sales for it to be considered qualified and for something to work on. But once I have that information, I now know this is somebody that I need to spend time with, or I should spend time with. Otherwise, I don't need to do this. I don't need to make myself busy. And the problem when you do it the other way, Medic is great. Medic is great for the sales process, but not for qualifying. Bant and Anim, if you're watching this and you're using Bant and Anim, stop now. Bant is 70 years old. People don't realize 70 years old. IBM invented it in the 50s. Stop. But you want people working with people who can buy what you're selling and where you can sell a solution to their problem. It doesn't benefit anybody to work on something because you need to be busy. So there's the beginning of the 3X problem, is dialing into qualified, truly qualified. Then the next step is discovery. And I'll give a nod to my friend Keenan, who wrote a book called Gap Selling, and he's got training programs. It's the best $12 or $15 investment that you will make. And the first time I read it, I think I've read it 4 times now. The first time I read it, all I could think of through the whole book was all the deals that I lost because I did discovery wrong, or my teams did discovery wrong. So now that I have my qualified opportunity, I should spend time here. The discovery is designed to figure out, is there a fit for the solution that I'm selling? Doesn't matter what the solution is, by the way. Is there a financial problem, a financial gap big enough to justify the decision, right? We all know this part. You can't sell a $500,000 solution to solve a $200,000 problem. And we have salespeople who either haven't been trained to do that, or they're in a culture where they need to have this X factor of pipeline. So they'll work on a deal trying to get it to the 500,000 or $1 million to justify it, or worse. And this goes back to your comment earlier about value. Worse is they say, I'm going to sell the $500,000 deal at a discount and I'll sell it for 100. And the customer is likely to not be happy with that. They may be happy in the moment of like, ooh, 8% discount, I'm awesome. But then the solution doesn't do what they want, or it's very expensive to operate. And eventually they just churn and they say, oh, that Acme technology, that stuff was terrible. It didn't work.
Sure. Interesting.
And so then only after you've done qualification and discovery, yes, they can buy. They're good. There's a qualified prospect here. Yes, I have a solution fit in a financial metric that makes sense. So now I get into Medic. Now I'll do a demo. And the demo does nothing more than to prove out what you learned in discovery. It's not feature. Look, I can make the screen turn blue and have dancing whirly gigs. Like, I didn't ask for dancing whirly gigs. I don't care about that. And then the proposal flows from the demo. So it's a very natural process at that point. and you're only selling to people who can and will buy what you have.
Can I ask a question then? So a few things have run through my mind, and this would be really interesting if we were doing this live. I would imagine the chat would just be like on fire right now, because people are going to have an emotional reaction to hearing that, right? It's not like you just people go, oh yeah, logically that will make sense. They're going, but hold on, I was taught to sell pain. I've been spin trained. Of course, pain's the right thing. There has to be pain. So I would imagine that people will definitely react emotionally to hearing that. So when you're talking to real people like sales leaders and salespeople about this paradigm shift, what sort of reactions do you often get, and then how do you counter that?
The first thing is suspending disbelief, right? They're like, no, Mike, no, which is typical. That's common, right? Anytime you challenge a belief, sometimes some will get very defensive about it, and some just want to prove you wrong. And I'm not trying to be right or wrong. I'm trying to get salespeople to making quota.
Sure.
So then what I say is like, here's the biggest body of evidence that says that what I'm saying probably is right. And it's this. In the last 2 years, we fired tens of thousands of salespeople, which theoretically means I have fewer salespeople working on the same territory and the same market opportunity. But we still only have 47 to 62% of the reps making quota, and close rates are still between 15 and 25%. So guess what? The problem is not the rep. Well, maybe it is, but the problem is the process.
Sure.
That's usually when people are like, hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah.
If I take 10 reps and I shrink it down to 4, all 4 should be making quota now, right? But they're not. If I put 15 people on the football field, American football, and that team doesn't win, may not be the players.
Yeah. I love that. It's so true, right? When you bring the right coach into a team environment, it could be the worst performing team, and then suddenly they become the best performing team, Who was the San Francisco 49ers coach that did that so successfully?
Not Shanahan. Oh my gosh. Back when they won all the Super Bowls. I can't believe I just forgot.
Yeah, with Joe Montana.
Yeah. I can see him. Silver hair. Yeah.
Again, the chat would be like,
well, same thing. Bill Belichick with the Patriots, right?
Yeah.
Patriots, people forget the Patriots went to 2 Super Bowls before and got smoked in both of them. They played against the Bears. Bears kicked the crap out of them. Then they played against the Packers, and the Packers kicked the crap out of them. So it wasn't like the Patriots were always a bad football team, though most of the time they were a terrible football team. It was that you bring in the right coach for the right time, by the way. Then you get a different result. Yes, you have to change players and you have to change schemes. You change schemes week to week, but you don't show up for a game one week without a plan, without having practiced. You don't show up with baseball equipment. Unfortunately, I do believe this is where we are in a lot of B2B sales. And what I'm reading on LinkedIn would seem to indicate that that is correct. And you look at the stuff that people are posting, that's a lot of complaining and a lot of, people self-diagnosing or saying, you need to do this different, you need to do that different, but they actually haven't done it.
Sure.
Or they haven't done it in a repeatable way to say, that's actually going to work.
Yeah, sure. I like that. And I think there's a lot of comparisons to sport, right? I remember that the manager of the 49ers, who managed Joe Montana, wrote a book, and it was called The Score Takes Care of Itself. And it's all about producing the right systems. And my old CEO used to say, and I really loved this about him, people don't break, systems do. So whenever something went wrong, and I remember a couple of times calling in with like a problem, and I'd come from a culture where you bought problems, you were going to get like really challenged on those problems. If you lost a client, you were in a board meeting doing a post-mortem as to how you lost the client, right? Even if it was definitely the wrong client going into the machine. So I had like fear around speaking to people about problems, being really transparent. But he was always totally cool with it, because he wanted to understand, well, what was the underlying process problem that happened? Where did the system break? Because I know that you're not a bad person with bad intentions, and people have off days, but fundamentally, even on off days, our system should still work. So the systems protect people from failing. And it's so true that I would imagine it in a situation where let's say I was a sales leader with a sales team, you came in as my CRO and you said, hey, we don't need this 3-4x pipeline. I'm like, I feel like comfort with my 4 times pipeline. I'm being praised around having 4 times pipeline. I'm giving my team incentives and spiffs around activity to generate pipeline. Pipeline is good. And then you tell me, no, it's bad. And then my team's got a discovery problem. They would go, no, we love our pipeline. We won awards. This is great. But the reality is they're not hitting quota. So they're failing and no one wants to fail. So if you can put a system in place that means that they're going to be successful, then they're going to love you. And is it really the case that all of the problems in the market, this 31% of sales teams hitting quota today, is because salespeople are crap? Absolutely not.
No, listen. Salespeople are great. I love salespeople, and I love this career. By the way, I've been afforded an opportunity in this life because of sales that I could never have dreamed of. Right? I'm not being self-deprecating. I barely graduated from high school, barely got into college, university, barely graduated from a state school. By the way, it wasn't like I went to like an Ivy League school and didn't do well. I'm barely. But here I am, with having had this great career, made a lot of money, traveled around the world, and met amazing people, and afforded a pretty good lifestyle for my family. In turn, who my kids have turned out incredibly well, and there's a lot of good here. And what I want before I retire, because I'm significantly older than you, which you probably figured out, I want to leave something positive when I leave this industry. I want salespeople to be able to have the same opportunities in life that I've had. It's not an ego thing at all. I've been humbled in ways that I will never talk about publicly. I just really genuinely want people to have good things in this life. And it won't happen the way we're asking people to operate right now.
Sure.
In fact, what it does, and this is the heartbreaker to it, I don't know that we had planned to go there, but the heartbreaker is when you talk to salespeople and sales leaders on a personal level like this, the stories are awful. Mm-hmm. The anxiety, the depression, the cascading effect on family, the cascading effect on alcohol. And it's not because, to your point, they're not bad people. It's the opposite. They're really good people that want to do really good things in these environments where their CEOs and CROs, largely because of the investors, are beating the crap out of them to do more and be more and get more, but they don't have more to get, or they haven't been taught how to do it. And so one of the things that I also started to write about a few years ago is the damage that's been done by ICP. ICP is necessary, ideal customer profile. You need to have that because you don't want to be selling ship's wheels to landscapers. There's no point in doing that, right? But there's an ideal opportunity profile, an IOP, that says, really, that's the qualification piece. Am I talking to somebody who can actually buy what I'm selling? Just because my product is built for financial services and healthcare, if somebody comes to me from hospitality and they've done the research and they have a unique problem that actually looks like a financial services type problem, and they say, hey, we've looked at your technology. This is like, looked at the demos online. I can't believe we found this. If the sales rep said, we sell to financial services and healthcare, I can't sell to you. Click. That would be ludicrous.
Sure.
So we need to teach people what good looks like.
Yeah.
So that they're selling to the right people. And once you start to do that, your raw material reduces, which is cost, and your yield increases. And by the way, so for anybody who, maybe if there's a CFO watching, or you want to go to your CFO, imagine going to your CFO and saying, I want $1 million for marketing, and I'm going to give you back $150,000 because that's the current yield, 15%. That's it. That's all you're getting. CFO would throw you out of their office. That would be a very short conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's what they're doing right now. And when we talk, by the way, so when I talk to CFOs and investors, this is their frustration. Like, marketing wants more money, but we're not getting more out of the other end. So I don't want to give them more money. And you're right, you shouldn't. You should tell them they have to fix their process. They have to fix how they're going to market.
Yeah. I love this. So when you talk about ideal opportunity profile, this is really interesting. So I did a talk last night with the Pavilion on the Bench community. I know this might be released a bit later on, but it was it was on a rainy September day, and there was the Pavilion on the Bench community is like 860 people, and on the call was like 40 people, and it was just all these amazing executives and associates who were looking for the next challenge. And I did a training around how to laser in on finding the challenge that you want in your job search. And I've coined the phrase ideal challenge profile. So in a job search, one of the first things that I talk to people about, and same with fractionals, let's say I'm talking to you about, the next gig that you're looking for, it would be, well, what's the challenge that you love to solve? Not what can you do, but like, what do you love to do? You're instinctively volunteering for it. When you're doing it, you're in flow, time is running away. Afterwards, you feel energized. It gives you strength. It is your red threads, based on the book Love and Work by Marcus Buckingham. So I teach people very simple methodologies to be able to answer some questions, which helps them to understand what they get love from in terms of the business challenges they love to solve. And because I'm mainly focused on early stage startups, people they love challenge. They're not looking for the security of a large company. I'm looking for security, and I'm looking for resource. It's like, I love challenge. I love these problems. For some reason, the goal of like building the first sales team, making that first hire, creating the ICP, creating the playbooks, that's the thing that I get a kick out of. So we're going to try and find companies who are looking to do that thing. Then if you can reach out to a founder and say, hey, know that you have just got seed funding, or know that you have just made your first sales hire, I would imagine that these problems are going to be front of mind for you right now. By the way, we did that in my last company and we grew from there to there. Would you be open to a 15-minute conversation about it? If you find someone who's got the challenge that you've already done, that you've got some experience of, and that you love, you are such a good fit for that company. But it's true. It's like they have a real challenge. You're not going, do you think that you might have some pain around culture in your business? Do you think you might have some problems around uniformed process? They're like, no, I'm trying to go from 1 million to 5 million ARR, or I'm trying to take this new product to market, or I'm trying to grow my average deal size from 5K to 50K. I'm trying to move into enterprise. There's a challenge that they're trying to solve, which if you've got experience of, you are their go-to person. So it's exactly the same situation with what you described. And we've all got different ways of describing it, but we've come to the same truth, which is you're looking for someone who has the exact challenge that you can solve. And I just would love to hear your thoughts on that.
So this is, I agree with you 100%. Right. And it's funny because I'm looking as a fractional leader, I'm looking for new contracts, maybe even a full-time operational role. If the right thing came along, is what I keep saying. If the right thing came along, I would do that. And I look at postings and the number of applicants, 867 applicants for this post, for this job. Yeah, okay, I'm done. But what they're not dialed into is I'm looking for the person, the leader who can solve this problem. I want to take my business from 20 million to 50 million. If you haven't done that, and I do see this from time to time, if you have not done that, don't apply. We don't want to talk to you. Now, I know there are people out there like, well, there are people who haven't done that, but that are talented and need the opportunity and. It's like, yeah, but you're not going to get that job. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with that philosophy, but if you are the CEO who has to make that hire, you're not going to hire somebody that's like, well, Mike's a really good guy, but he's never worked in a company bigger than $5 million. I'm going to give him a chance here at my company to take us from 20 million to 50 million. Absolutely not. That is not going to happen. So just like on the sale and qualifying, you have to look at that and say, I'm not a fit here, and don't apply. Don't create your own anxiety.
Yeah.
So yes, understanding the challenge that you solve, and again, personal experience. Years ago, I found myself out of work for the first time in my life. I've worked since I was 10 years old, whether delivering newspapers, cutting lawns, whatever. I have always, my entire life, worked. First time, this is 2006, 2007. First time ever I'm out of work. That's a whole nother story. I met with a recruiter, one of the most prestigious recruiters in the Boston area. And he says to me in the meeting, he goes, well, what do you want to do? When I told him, he goes, well, what won't you do? I was like, I don't know. He goes, I can't help you. Like, just like that, can't help you. So I can't help you until you know the 3 things that you want, the 3 things that you will not do. And basically he's like, get out of my office. Okay. At first I was pissed. I was like, that's it? 15 minutes and he won't even like have a conversation with me? So it took me several weeks to figure this out, by the way, what I wanted, what I didn't. And what I found was, so I was coming off of my first VP of sales job, and I said, I don't want to be a VP of sales again. I'd worked 20 years to get to that level, and I was miserable. I hated it. Had to go to the office every day, hated going to the office every day. Hadn't gone to an office every day at that point, no, like 12 years. And I was working like a crazy person. I was working like 60, 70, 80 hours a week. So once I figured that out, and I knew what I wanted for type of technology. I even knew the company that I wanted to work for because I had met this company and I was totally blown away with the technology. Never seen anything like it. I get a call from a recruiter in August of 2007. He starts to explain the company. I stopped him. I said, is it cast iron? And he's like, yeah, how'd you know? I said, just the description. I said, I want the job. He goes, it's a regional director job. It's not a VP. I said, I don't care. I want the job. I want to work for the company, and I don't want to be a VP of sales. Gets me the interview with the CEO. Meet with Ken. Happened to be in Boston. His daughter was looking at colleges. Sit down with him, and I say to him, Ken, you need to know something before we get started. I'm not interested in any job. I don't want to be a VP of sales anymore, and I don't want to go to an office every day, and I don't want to work 80 hours a week. This was my introduction to him, by the way. And he smiles, and he says, I just hired a VP of sales. I don't need a VP of sales. By the way, that VP of sales was somebody that I worked with before. We kind of knew of each other. He was like one of the best reps that Siebel ever had. And I was just like a moderate rep in New England, opposite coast, the whole thing. I worked for him there. And then I worked for him for 5 years at his company, Jitterbit, where he was the CEO. Great guy. So he said, I just hired a VP of sales. I don't need a VP of sales. He said, unless you're in Mountain View, there is no office, so you're going to work from home. So that's not a factor. He goes, and if you're working 80 hours a week for me, you're doing something wrong. So I knew he had the technology that I wanted to sell. I knew the problem that he was solving, and I knew it was ubiquitous. I love ubiquitous problems. I knew a little bit about the team, and I liked the team. I liked the role, and I had crossed out the things that I did not want to do. So when the offer came, I was like, done. And I had a great time and a great experience working at that company. And we built something amazing.
Sure.
So I think I answered the question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you did. You did a great job. I think we need to wrap up soon, Mike, but we're definitely going to have to do a second podcast. We're going to have to do a part 2 to this because there's some other things that I would love to talk to you about in more detail, like the whole when a startup gets investment. I'd love to drill onto that one. I'd love to talk to you about the benefits of fractional. But let's wrap up for our listeners. So to summarize, could you just give us that kind of concise view of the problem, the solution, and what people can do? What's a simple, practical step that they can take to move towards better?
So the fundamental problem that we have to solve for is that our B2B salespeople have not been trained in how to sell. And what we have done is we have implemented and instituted lots of technology to try to help them, but we haven't actually fixed the problem itself. So the very first thing that we need to do as leaders is to get into the underlying process, the human part of this. Separate out any of the machine stuff. If you institute AI and the process is broken, like back at the beginning of my technology selling days, there was I can't remember what firm he worked for, but he said this was like in the days of workflow, early workflow. And he said, if you automate a bad process, you get worse faster. So now if you do that with AI, you get worse at hyperspeed. So before you start implementing more automation, get to the underlying process. Is the underlying process sound? Does it work? Does it make sense? Do my people understand the optimal behavior at each step and stage of the process, as with manufacturing? As I do that, as I solve for each of those steps and stages, and yes, it's time consuming. I get it. And it's a lot of work. I get it. But as I optimize for each step and stage, I improve my yield. And that's the goal that we're going for, is how do we get more people to quota and improve the close rate so that I can reduce the raw material and improve margin. We in business, we exist to make money. So you need to do the things that make you more money. And that starts with the human to human part of this process. You won't fix it with technology. You'll make it worse.
I love that. I love that. And I did promise I would give you the name.
Yes.
for your process.
I hadn't forgotten, by the way.
This is going to be a massive letdown now. So we all know that cars are pretty bad if they're two-wheel drive, right? You know, you're going to get all the problems that you get associated with having a really poor amount of traction going onto the road. But four-wheel drive cars are badass, and if they're Audis, they're called Quattros. so I was thinking maybe the name is like four-wheel drive, 4WD. So you could call it four-wheel drive, 4WD, or maybe there's a Quattro name that you could bring in.
Quattro qualifying.
Yeah, I love it. There you go. Boom. It came up first. The 4WD process. Well, look, Mike, I think that's a beautiful place to finish, and promise that you'll do another pod with us soon, because I've loved having you on.
Oh my gosh, I would love to. This has been, I have enjoyed every part of this. I truly hope people got some value out of it, and didn't turn it off after 5 minutes and be like, I don't listen to this guy.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. For everyone that's listened, I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next episode. Mike, thank you for your time.
Thank you.